When the PlayStation 2 first hit the scene, most of us were blown away by the sheer amount of detail squeezed onto those 128-bit polygons. From hyperrealistic textures and insane physics to massive open worlds and lightning-fast particle effects, the PS2 proved you could get cinematic visuals without a high-end PC. In this video we're diving into the golden era of the PlayStation 2 with a look at 25 games that truly pushed the console to its limits. So grab your nostalgia caps and a glass of something retro, because we're about to relive the moments when developers turned a modest machine into a graphical powerhouse. Jak 3 is often remembered not just for its darker tone and ambitious open-world design, but for how aggressively it pushed the PlayStation 2 hardware to its edge. By the time Jak 3 released in 2004, most studios were still wrestling with the PS2's notoriously complex architecture. Naughty Dog, though, had all but mastered it. From the get-go, the game throws you into a massive sprawling desert that's packed with dynamic lighting. The sun beats down on sand dunes that ripple with subtle vertex shading, and the horizon is alive with heat haze effects that would have been a nightmare for a 2003 console. Yet the PS2 keeps everything smooth, proving its GPU can handle large-scale environments without collapsing. What really pushes the limits is the character work. Jak's model sports a high-resolution texture set and per-pixel lighting that gives his fur a believable sheen. When he morphs into Dark Jak, the shader blends multiple texture layers in real time, something you'd expect from a next-gen title, not a PS2 game. The same goes for the enemies, each one uses skeletal animation with dozens of bones, allowing fluid, aggressive movements that stay buttery smooth even during massive brawler sequences. Particle effects are another ace up Jak 3's sleeve. Explosions, dust clouds, and water splashes all feature hundreds of particles on screen at once, with alpha blending and depth sorting that keep the chaos from looking muddy. The game even throws in real-time reflections on glass and metal surfaces, tiny details that add polish without tanking the frame rate. And let's not forget the soundtrack. The engine streams audio while simultaneously handling all that visual fireworks, a feat that squeezes the PS2's limited memory bandwidth to the max. The result? An immersive, cinematic experience that still feels fresh today. In many ways, Jak 3 represents the PS2 at peak performance. It's a showcase of what skilled developers could extract from the hardware: huge worlds, technical polish, and virtually seamless gameplay. It wasn't just a sequel, it was a statement of how far the console could be pushed. Final Fantasy X still feels like a watershed moment for the PlayStation 2, not just because it was the first in the series to feature fully voiced characters, but because it channeled every ounce of the console's power into a single sprawling world. From the moment you step onto the mist-shrouded Zanarkand ruins, the game throws a cascade of cinematic cutscenes, intricate facial animations, and a lush, pre-rendered backdrop that makes the horizon feel endless. Those gorgeous layered environments were built on the PS2's Emotion engine, and you can see the hardware straining under the weight of thousands of polygons, dynamic lighting, and real-time particle effects. The battle system, while turn-based, showcases the console's capabilities in other ways. The conditional turn-based battle engine lets you watch each character's unique attack animation play out in real time, complete with fluid motion blends and a seamless camera that tracks the action. Meanwhile, the summon sequences push the GPU to its limits, filling the screen with swirling particles and dazzling special effects that would have been impossible on earlier hardware. All of this came together with a groundbreaking soundtrack, a fully orchestrated score that streamed from the DVD while the game's massive assets loaded in the background. In short, Final Fantasy X didn't just ride the PS2's wave, it rode the wave so hard that the console's limits seemed to disappear, setting a new benchmark for what a console could achieve in the early 2000s.
Round 1. Fight!
Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance marked a major turning point for the franchise, and it also pushed the PlayStation 2 in ways that often get overlooked. Released in 2002, it was the series' first fully 3D entry built from the ground up for 6th-generation hardware, and that shift alone required the PS2 to handle far more complex character models, animations, and fighting arenas than earlier MK titles. Each fighter used a surprisingly high polygon count for the era, with detailed facial features, expressive stances, and fluid transitions between multiple martial arts styles, something uncommon in fighters at the time. Switching styles mid-combo demanded advanced animation blending, which taxed the PS2's limited memory and vector processing units. The game's new weapon system added another layer of complexity. Rendering dynamic weapons with unique hitboxes, collision responses, and damage states meant the engine had to juggle extra geometry and physics in real time. The PS2 also had to manage the game's enhanced particle effects while maintaining a consistent frame rate, something NetherRealm's predecessor studios refined significantly for this installment. Environmental detail was another place where Deadly Alliance pushed boundaries. Stages featured dynamic lighting, reflections, animated background elements, and a greater sense of depth compared to earlier MK arenas. All of this had to fit within the PS2's notoriously tight RAM, requiring clever streaming and asset compression. But perhaps the biggest leap was in presentation. The game included a rich crypt mode, pre-rendered cinematic sequences, and a sprawling roster with unique fighting styles, content density that pushed storage and memory efficiency to their limits. For many players, Deadly Alliance felt like MK Reborn, and technically, it showed what a well-optimized engine could squeeze out of the PS2: smoother animations, richer visuals, and a deeper, more modern fighting experience that redefined the series going forward.
Get over here!
54, Captain. Commencing pursuit. Vehicle is a
Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, released in 2002, is often celebrated as one of the standout titles in the racing genre, particularly for PlayStation 2. What makes it special isn't just the adrenaline-pumping gameplay, but also how it pushed the PS2 hardware to its limits. The game showcased impressive graphics for its time, detailed car models, realistic environments, and dynamic lighting effects that brought the high-speed police chases to life. Its expansive open-world environments and seamless tracks demanded a lot from the console's processing power, especially in handling multiple AI opponents and police units simultaneously. The game employed advanced graphics techniques like motion blur, real-time reflections, and detailed textures, all while maintaining smooth frame rates, an impressive feat considering the PS2's hardware constraints. Moreover, Hot Pursuit 2 featured a robust physics engine, creating more realistic car handling and crash dynamics, which required optimized calculations. The game also pushed the storage limits of the PS2's DVD format, offering a sizable game world and rich audiovisual content. In essence, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 was a technical showcase that demonstrated what the PS2 was capable of. Combining visual fidelity, expansive gameplay, and smooth performance, setting a benchmark for racing games of its era. It's a testament to the developer's ingenuity, pushing the hardware to deliver a thrilling, immersive experience. Shadow of the Colossus, released in 2005, is a masterpiece that still makes us gasp at how far the hardware could be stretched. From the moment you step onto the barren plateau, the engine is already working overtime. The game's massive seamless landscapes are built from a clever blend of low-poly geometry and high-resolution textures, creating a sense of scale that feels impossible for a 2004 console. What really pushes the PS2 to its limit is the lighting. The soft, directional sunlight casts long shadows across the terrain, while the dynamic sky transitions from dawn to dusk in real time. The developers used per-pixel lighting and vertex shaders to give the Colossi a glowing aura that changes as you approach, a feat that taxed the GPU but gave each encounter a cinematic feel. Then there's the physics. Each Colossus is a massive, articulated model with dozens of moving parts, all reacting to your grapple hook and environmental forces. The game's collision detection and skeletal animation run simultaneously, keeping the frame rate surprisingly smooth even during the most chaotic battles. Particle effects add the final punch. Dust clouds, debris, and water splashes burst forth in real time, all rendered with alpha blending to keep the visuals crisp. Meanwhile, the iconic orchestral score streams from the disc, proving the PS2's limited memory bandwidth could still handle high-quality audio alongside the visual heavy lifting. So, Shadow of the Colossus isn't just a beautiful puzzle, it's a technical showcase that squeezed every ounce of PS2 power to deliver an unforgettable or inspiring experience. When Resident Evil 4 made its way to the PlayStation 2 in 2005, it became one of the most impressive examples of technical optimization on the console. The game was originally built as a GameCube showcase, taking advantage of hardware that excelled at rendering detailed textures and lighting. Porting that experience to the PS2's hardware with less memory, lower fill rate, and a more complex architecture, should have resulted in a dramatically inferior version. And yet, Capcom managed to deliver one of the most ambitious PS2 releases ever, squeezing every bit of performance out of the system. The PS2 version retained Resident Evil 4's large intricately detailed environments, dynamic enemy AI, and cinematic camera system. This was especially challenging because Resident Evil 4's over-the-shoulder perspective required high detail up close. Textures, geometry, and animation all needed to hold up under scrutiny. To accomplish this on PS2, Capcom employed aggressive texture streaming, smart level of detail scaling, and heavy engine tuning to keep the game running smoothly without constant loading screens. Enemy behavior was another major strain. Resident Evil 4 features some of the most reactive AI of its generation, villagers who flank, dodge, coordinate attacks, and use tools. Running these behaviors in real time, alongside physics for breakable objects, particle effects, and scripted cinematic sequences, pushed the PS2's limited RAM and CPU very close to their ceilings. Lighting and effects also highlight how hard the PS2 was working. Dynamic shadows, muzzle flashes, environmental fog, and atmospheric lighting had to be re-engineered to fit the console's capabilities, yet the overall presentation remained remarkably close to the GameCube original. Even the sheer number of on-screen enemies was a technical achievement on hardware not built for that level of intensity. In the end, Resident Evil 4 stands as a testament to clever optimization. While some visual compromises were inevitable, the fact that the game ran as well as it did, while preserving its groundbreaking gameplay and cinematic style, showed just how far a talented team could push the PlayStation 2 beyond what many believed possible. The Matrix: Path of Neo is an action-packed game that vividly captures the essence of the iconic film trilogy. Released in 2005, it was ambitious in scope, aiming to bring players into the immersive world of the Matrix with cinematic storytelling and intense combat. One of the most impressive aspects of the game was how it pushed the PlayStation 2 hardware to its limits. The developers, Shiny Entertainment, crafted a game that featured large open environments, complex physics, and high-quality motion capture for realistic martial arts and bullet-dodging effects. Achieving this level of detail on the PS2 was no small feat. Its hardware was aging by then, with limited RAM and processing power compared to modern standards. Despite these constraints, Path of Neo delivered smooth combat mechanics, dynamic camera angles, and impressive visual effects, including slow-motion bullet shots and Matrix-style dodges that created a cinematic experience. The game also boasted a multi-branch storyline, multiple endings, and a variety of weapons and powers, all of which require the console to juggle complex assets and real-time physics calculations. In essence, The Matrix: Path of Neo was a technical achievement, showcasing what the PS2 was capable of when pushed to its limits. It sacrificed some graphical fidelity for a more ambitious gameplay-rich experience that allowed players to truly feel like Neo, bending the rules of the Matrix in their living room. Okami burst onto the PS2 in 2001 and still feels like a love letter to Japanese art. But what's often overlooked is how it actually stretched the console's hardware to the edge. From the start, the game's signature watercolor brush rendering demanded a massive amount of texture memory. Each brush stroke is a dynamic blend of colors that the GPU had to composite in real time. Coupled with the cel-shaded lighting, the system was handling far more polygon detail and texture layers than most titles of its generation, forcing the developers to get clever with compression and streaming. Beyond graphics, Okami's brush mechanic introduced a physics-heavy playground where you could slice vines, summon wind, or paint rivers that actually altered the terrain. That level of interactivity required a CPU to juggle AI, collision detection, and the brush's effect pipeline simultaneously, something the PS2's 300 MHz Emotion engine wasn't originally built for. The result? A visual masterpiece that still looks striking today, and a technical feat that proved the PS2 could do more than just render polygons, it could paint an entire world in motion.
Who goes there?
Metal Gear Solid 2 was a groundbreaking title for the PlayStation 2, pushing the console's hardware to its limits in impressive ways. When it launched in 2001, it showcased the PS2's raw power, with incredibly detailed character models, expansive environments, and smooth animations that weren't common at the time. The game featured highly realistic textures and complex lighting effects, which added a new level of immersion. One of the most impressive feats was its seamless environments and open-ended gameplay areas, which required a lot of data processing and efficient memory management. Hideo Kojima and his team optimized the game to fit these large, detailed worlds while maintaining fluid performance. The game also utilized advanced physics for realistic character movements and interactions, a feat that was quite ambitious for the hardware back then. Moreover, Sons of Liberty incorporated cutting-edge cinematic sequences and voice acting, making the storytelling immersive without sacrificing gameplay fluidity. All of these elements combined meant that the PS2 was pushed to deliver a cinematic and engaging experience, blending technical innovation with compelling narrative.
But I promise you that they will not succeed. Some say
In essence, Metal Gear Solid 2 wasn't just a game, it was a technical showcase, proving that the PS2 could handle rich, complex gameplay and visuals, setting a new standard for future titles.
Snake, respond! Snake! Snake!
Open your eyes, Alicia.
Valkyrie Profile 2 is a stunning showcase of the PlayStation 2's capabilities, released in 2007 by Tri-Ace. The game is renowned for its richly detailed 2D sprite artwork, layered over 3D backgrounds, creating a beautiful blend of old-school charm and modern graphics. This fusion pushed the hardware to its limits, demanding both high-resolution sprites and intricate background environments, all running smoothly. The game's battle system is incredibly deep and dynamic, featuring real-time combat with complex animations and particle effects that tested the PS2's processing power. Managing multiple characters and enemies on screen simultaneously required efficient coding and optimization, especially given the game's elaborate visual effects like spellcasting and environmental distortions. Furthermore, Valkyrie Profile 2 features expansive dungeons, detailed character models, and seamless transitions between exploration and combat, all of which showcase the PS2's ability to handle large, complex scenes without sacrificing performance. The game also utilized advanced lighting and shading techniques, enhancing the atmospheric depth and immersion. Overall, Valkyrie Profile 2 is a testament to Tri-Ace's technical mastery, pushing the PS2 with its beautiful sprite work, complex gameplay mechanics, and graphical fidelity. It proved that the console could still deliver visually stunning and mechanically deep RPG experiences late into its life cycle.
Left me and then went down to the basement. What are you doing? I said don't.
Ghosthunter on the PlayStation 2 is a perfect example of a game that quietly pushed the hardware to its absolute limits. Released in 2003, it delivered lighting, atmosphere, and environmental detail that felt ahead of its time for the PS2. Real-time dynamic lighting was the game's standout feature. Flashlights, spectral glows, and shadow effects were used constantly, creating tension while also demanding a lot from the system's GPU. The game also made smart use of the PS2's limited memory through tightly designed levels and controlled camera angles, allowing it to load detailed environments without noticeable interruptions. Character models featured expressive animations and subtle facial movements, which was rare for the era, especially during in-engine cutscenes. Sound design helped mask technical constraints as well. Positional audio and ambient effects filled the space, making areas feel larger and more complex than they actually were. While the PS2 struggled at times with frame drops during heavy effects, Ghosthunter showed how clever optimization and strong artistic direction could stretch aging hardware far beyond expectations. It didn't just scare players, it proved how much untapped power the PS2 still had. Final Fantasy XII, released in 2006, is a technical marvel that showcased the PlayStation 2's full potential. Built on a new game engine, the Crystal Tools, it delivered vast, seamless open-world environments with detailed textures and expansive landscapes that were unprecedented for the console. The game's massive world map, filled with towns, dungeons, and outdoor areas, pushed the PS2's memory and processing capabilities to handle large-scale, interconnected zones without loading screens. One of the key innovations was its real-time combat system, the Active Dimension Battle, which allowed seamless transitions between exploration and battle. This required real-time calculations for dozens of characters and enemies on the screen simultaneously, demanding impressive optimization from the hardware. The game also featured advanced lighting, detailed character models, and dynamic weather effects, all of which added depth and immersion but taxed the system further. Final Fantasy XII also made heavy use of high-quality FMV sequences and cinematic presentation, pushing the PS2's graphics capabilities. The extensive audio design, with voice acting and orchestral music, complemented the visuals perfectly, demonstrating the console's ability to handle complex multimedia tasks. In summary, Final Fantasy XII was a showcase of technical ingenuity, utilizing innovative systems and vast detailed worlds to push the PS2 to its limits, delivering a rich, immersive experience that stood out even late in the console's lifecycle. Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks landed on the PS2 in September 2005 and instantly felt like a punch to the gut for the aging hardware. Midway's team packed the game with a multi-directional fighting engine that let you chain combos on up to 8 enemies at once, a feat that forced the GPU to juggle dozens of animated models, dynamic lighting and those infamous X-ray finishes without dropping the frame rate. The result was a buttery smooth 60 FPS experience in most arenas, something many reviewers still cite as a technical marvel for the console. What really pushed the PS2 to its limits was the sheer amount of on-screen action. Enemies could be launched into the air, bounce off walls, and re-enter the fumble chain, all while the camera swung wildly to keep the chaos in view. The game also crammed fully voiced dialogue, cinematic cut-scenes and a sprawling, semi-open world that required the console to stream textures on the fly. Those moments where a massive Goro or a swarm of Outworld soldiers fill the screen showed the console's fill rate being stretched to the brink. Co-op adds another layer of strain. 2 players can unleash simultaneous fatalities performed on multiple foes at once, and the engine has to render each gruesome finish in real time. Even the Xbox version, which shared the same core code, suffered from occasional slowdowns and memory hogs, hinting that the PS2 version was running at the very edge of its capabilities. In short, Shaolin Monks didn't just ride the PS2's wave, it surfed the crest, forcing the console to deliver fluid high-octane action that still feels impressive even 2 decades later. If you ever fire it up on a PS2 or a faithful emulator, you'll hear the hardware groan just a little under the pressure, proof that a good game can make even an old beast roar. Gran Turismo 4 is one of the clearest examples of a game that absolutely pushed the PlayStation 2 to its technical limits. Released in 2004, it took hardware that was already 4 years old and delivered visuals, scale, and realism that many thought were impossible on the PS2. First, there's the sheer amount of content. Over 700 cars and more than 50 tracks, many with multiple layouts, all running on a system with only 32 megabytes of RAM. That alone was a massive technical achievement. Polyphony Digital used extremely efficient asset streaming and memory management to make it work. Visually, Gran Turismo 4 pushed lighting, reflections, and car modeling far beyond earlier PS2 titles. The cars featured highly detailed interiors, accurate reflections, and smooth animations, all rendered at a rock-solid 60 frames per second during races. Maintaining that framerate was critical for realism, and the PS2 was being pushed constantly to keep it. The game also made smart compromises. There was no real-time damage modeling and no online play at launch, allowing the system's power to be focused entirely on physics, visuals, and AI. Even photo mode, which rendered cars at extremely high detail, showed just how much untapped power Polyphony Digital squeezed out of the hardware. In the end, Gran Turismo 4 didn't just run on the PS2, it defined how far the console could go, setting a benchmark that few games ever matched.
Stop! Get down on your knees. Now down on your stomach.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is one of the most ambitious games ever released on the PlayStation 2, and a perfect example of how developers pushed the console far beyond what anyone expected. When it launched in 2004, it delivered a scale and freedom that felt more like a next-generation experience on aging hardware. The most impressive achievement was the open world itself. San Andreas wasn't just one city, it was 3 massive cities, connected by countryside, deserts, forests, and highways, all streaming in real time with no loading screens. On a system with limited RAM and CPU power, this required incredibly efficient world streaming, aggressive memory management, and clever use of fog and draw distance. The PS2 was also handling complex AI systems simultaneously: traffic, pedestrians, gang warfare, police behavior, and mission scripting, all happening dynamically as the player moved through the world. Add in vehicles, aircraft, boats, and physics calculations, and the hardware was under constant pressure. Visually, the game made smart trade-offs. Character models and textures were simple, but animation variety, world density, and scale took priority. Features like character customization, RPG-style stats, and environmental variety pushed CPU and memory usage even further. Despite occasional frame drops, San Andreas proved the PS2 could handle a living, breathing open world. It didn't just stretch the hardware, it redefined what was possible on the console, leaving a lasting impact on open-world game design.
Look at that! It's enormous!
Peter Jackson's King Kong is often overlooked, but it's one of the most technically impressive games ever released on the PlayStation 2. When it launched in 2005, it pushed the console to its absolute limits by delivering a cinematic experience that felt far beyond what PS2 hardware was known for. One of the biggest achievements was its visual atmosphere. The game used advanced lighting, fog, and motion blur to create dense jungles and dramatic set pieces that hid technical limitations while enhancing immersion. On the PS2, these effects were incredibly demanding, yet the game maintained a strong sense of scale and tension. The character animation was another standout. Facial expressions, body language, and enemy movement were far more detailed than typical PS2 titles, helping sell the emotional weight of the story. Combined with seamless transitions between first-person survival segments and third-person King Kong sections, the engine was constantly shifting gameplay systems in real time. The game also avoided traditional HUD elements, relying on visual and audio cues instead.
Gotta reload. 3 magazines on backup.
This design choice meant the system had to communicate gameplay information through animation and sound alone, increasing processing demands. Despite running close to the edge of the hardware's capabilities, King Kong proved that with smart design and cinematic direction, the PS2 could deliver experiences that felt decidedly next-gen, making it one of the console's most impressive technical showcases. When Monster Hunter first hit the PlayStation 2 in 2004, it felt like stepping into a living, breathing ecosystem. The game dropped you into sprawling, vertically layered habitats, dense forests, scorching deserts, mist-filled swamps, each teeming with creatures that reacted to your every move. What made the experience jaw-dropping wasn't just the sheer size of the maps, but the way the engine kept everything alive without crashing the aging hardware. The developers pulled off a few tricks that pushed the PS2 to its limits. First, they used aggressive level of detail scaling, swapping high-poly models for lower-res versions as you moved farther away, which saved precious GPU cycles. Second, they streamed textures and audio from the DVD in real time, a demanding task for the console's relatively slow drive. The monster AI was another beast entirely. Each hunter had to track multiple attack patterns, environmental cues, and even fatigue, all calculated on the CPU while the graphics pipeline was busy rendering massive battle scenes. All of this meant longer load times, occasional frame rate dips, and a constant hum of the DVD drive, signs that the PS2 was being stretched thin. Yet those technical hiccups only added to the charm. They made the hunt feel raw, immersive, and undeniably next-gen for its time. In short, Monster Hunter proved that with clever programming, even a decade-old console could host a world as wild and demanding as the monsters that roamed it. Haunting Ground is one of the most technically ambitious survival horror games on the PlayStation 2, and it quietly pushed the hardware to its limits. Built on an enhanced version of the Resident Evil 4 engine, the game delivered real-time lighting, dynamic shadows, and highly detailed environments that were uncommon for the PS2 at the time. The castle isn't just a backdrop, it's a fully interconnected space with minimal loading, which was a major technical achievement on a system with limited memory. Character animations were especially demanding. Fiona's contextual reactions, stumbling, panicking, and physically recoiling from enemies, required complex animation blending that taxed the CPU. Enemy AI also ran persistently in the background, stalking the player across rooms rather than despawning, which added constant system load. Camera work pushed boundaries as well, using cinematic angles that dynamically shifted during gameplay without pre-rendered scenes. Combined with detailed facial animations and real-time physics interactions, the PS2 was operating near its ceiling. The result was occasional frame drops, but those limitations actually enhanced the horror. Haunting Ground didn't just test the PS2's power, it bent it to serve atmosphere, tension, and immersion in a way few games dared to try.
Commencing virtuous mission now.
Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is one of the clearest examples of a game pushing the PlayStation 2 to its absolute limits. Unlike earlier entries built around indoor environments, Snake Eater dropped players into massive outdoor jungles filled with dense foliage, dynamic camouflage systems, and long sight lines, an enormous technical challenge for PS2 hardware. The game rendered complex survival mechanics in real time. Injuries affected gameplay visually and mechanically, requiring layered animations and detailed character models. Enemy AI reacted to sound, movement, and camouflage patterns, constantly scanning environments that were far larger and more detailed than typical PS2 levels. Lighting and particle effects were pushed hard, especially during rainstorms, explosions, and nighttime sequences. Cutscenes were rendered in-engine with cinematic camera work, facial animation, and minimal loading, blurring the line between gameplay and film. To make all this work, Konami relied on aggressive streaming and clever memory management, pushing the CPU and limited RAM to their breaking point. Occasional frame drops were the cost, but the payoff was a living, reactive world that felt years ahead of its time. Snake Eater didn't just test the PS2, it redefined what the console was capable of delivering. God of War 2, released in 2007, is a prime example of the PlayStation 2's technical capabilities reaching their peak. Developed by Santa Monica Studio, the game delivered stunning visuals, showcasing highly detailed character models, intricate environments, and impressive special effects. The game's art direction combined with advanced lighting and shadow techniques brought the mythological world to life in ways that felt both grand and immersive. One of the key ways God of War 2 pushed the PS2 was through its expansive, multi-layered environments. The game featured large-scale battles against massive enemies, which demanded complex physics calculations and AI processing. The combat system itself was smooth and fluid, incorporating numerous combo animations, weapon effects, and particle effects, all of which required efficient hardware optimization to maintain high frame rates. The game also employed clever tricks like dynamic camera angles and seamless transitions during epic battles and set-piece scenes, which tested the system's ability to handle real-time rendering of complex scenes without performance dips. Despite the hardware limitations, God of War 2 managed to deliver cinematic visuals, intense action, and detailed worlds, proving the PS2 could handle ambitious, high-quality productions well into its lifecycle. In summary, God of War 2 was a technical masterpiece on the PS2, pushing its hardware to create a visually stunning, smoothly animated, and immersive mythological action experience.
Unhand the lady.
When Van Helsing hit the shelves in 2004, it wasn't just another action-adventure, it was a showcase of what the PlayStation 2 could really do when developers pushed the hardware past its comfort zone. First off, the visuals. The game's engine cramped the PS2's 300 MHz Emotion engine into rendering sprawling, cinematic set pieces, think towering castles, fog-filled moors, and massive boss battles, while keeping a relatively steady 30 FPS. To achieve that, the team leaned heavily on clever texture compression and dynamic lighting tricks, letting you see the flicker of torchlight on armor without the usual blur that plagued many PS2 titles. Then there's the physics. Van Helsing's gunplay and melee combos relied on a surprisingly robust ragdoll system. Enemies flail, get knocked back, and even tumble down stairs in a way that felt weighty for the era. The console's limited memory meant the developers had to sacrifice some detail, but they compensated with well-timed animations and a physics engine that felt responsive enough to keep the action visceral. Enemy AI was another frontier. The monsters don't just follow a script, they coordinate attacks, flank, and even retreat when low on health. This required the PS2's code processor to juggle dozens of enemy states on screen, a task that would have been a nightmare on less optimized hardware. Finally, the soundtrack, a full orchestral score, complete with choir, was streamed directly from the DVD, taking advantage of the PS2's DVD-ROM bandwidth and proving that the console could handle high-quality audio alongside demanding graphics. Van Helsing proved that a clever design can coax cinematic action and surprisingly smart AI out of the aging PS2, turning hardware limits into a canvas for creativity. It's less about raw power and more about what a dedicated team can achieve when they push a console past its comfort zone.
Get your cameras ready, folks. This ain't gonna last long.
Final round. Fight!
Tekken 5, released in 2004, is widely regarded as one of the best entries in the fighting game series and a showcase of the PlayStation 2's capabilities. The game pushed the console to its limits by delivering incredibly detailed character models, each with smooth animations and a high level of polish. The fighters' movements were fluid, with complex combos and attack sequences that required precise rendering and processing power. The game's environments were also richly detailed, featuring multiple stages with dynamic backgrounds and interactive elements, all rendered seamlessly in real time. Tekken 5 employed advanced shading and lighting effects, creating a sense of depth and realism that was impressive for a fighting game on the PS2. The game's animation system was highly optimized, enabling fast-paced, cinematic combat with minimal input lag and stable frame rates, even during intense battles with multiple effects on screen. Furthermore, Tekken 5 incorporated extensive character customization options and AI routines, which increased the processing demands on the hardware. Despite these challenges, the game maintained smooth gameplay and high-quality visuals, proving the PS2's ability to handle a technically demanding fighting game with a high level of detail and polish. In essence, Tekken 5 was a technical achievement that demonstrated the PS2's power to deliver deep, visually impressive, and smooth fighting gameplay, pushing the hardware to its peak for the genre. Onimusha, Dawn of Dreams marked a bold evolution for the series and stood as one of the most technically ambitious games on the PlayStation 2. Released late in the PS2's lifespan, it showed just how far developers had learned to push the hardware. The first thing that stood out was scale. Unlike earlier Onimusha titles, Dawn of Dreams featured larger environments, more enemies on screen, and faster, more chaotic combat. The PS2 had to juggle real-time action, particle effects, and cinematic camera angles all at once, and it mostly held up impressively well. Visually, the game pushed character modeling and animation to new heights for the console. Facial detail was sharper, armor and weapons had more intricate textures, and attack animations flowed together smoothly, giving combat a more modern feel. Magic effects and enemy transformations filled the screen with light and motion, stressing the PS2's graphical pipeline without completely sacrificing performance. Cinematics were another highlight. Seamless transitions between gameplay and cutscenes helped maintain immersion, and pre-rendered story moments showed off lighting and detail that rivaled early PS3 titles. The game also made smart use of the PS2's audio capabilities, delivering dramatic voice acting and a sweeping soundtrack that enhanced its darker, more emotional tone. Onimusha, Dawn of Dreams felt like Capcom's final technical flex on the PS2, a game that stretched the console's limits through scale, spectacle, and ambition, proving the system still had plenty of power left in the right hands. FlatOut 2, released in 2006, is a high-octane racing game that pushed the PlayStation 2's hardware in several impressive ways. Known for its chaotic crashes and destructible environments, the game delivered detailed vehicle damage models, with realistic destruction physics that were quite demanding for the hardware at the time. When vehicles collided or wrecked, the game dynamically broke apart, with debris flying and parts flying off in real time, requiring significant processing power to maintain fluid animation and physics calculations. The game featured large, detailed race tracks filled with interactive objects, multiple camera angles, and vibrant environments, all rendered smoothly during fast-paced races. To keep up with the chaos, FlatOut 2 employed advanced particle effects that added realism but increased the computational load. Managing these effects while maintaining stable frame rates and responsive controls was a significant technical challenge, especially on the PS2's hardware. Furthermore, the game supported multiplayer modes and AI drivers, which meant even more processing for the system when multiple cars and effects appeared simultaneously. Despite these demands, FlatOut 2 successfully delivered a frenetic, visually impressive experience, demonstrating the PS2's ability to handle complex physics, destructible environments, and high-speed gameplay all at once. In summary, FlatOut 2 was a technically demanding racing game that showcased the PS2's capabilities in physics simulation, destructibility, and graphical fidelity, pushing the system to deliver an adrenaline-fueled, chaotic experience.
Where am I?
When Silent Hill 3 hit the PlayStation 2 in 2003, it didn't just deliver a horror sequel, it showed the aging console what it was still capable of. The game's most striking feat is its texture work. Every rust-stained hallway, fog-filled street and Heather's flowing hair is rendered in 512 by 512 or higher textures, a resolution that made many contemporary titles look flat by comparison. By keeping the action confined to tight, atmospheric corridors, the developers let the emotion engine focus its limited polygon budget on detail, not distance. The lighting system is another hidden powerhouse. Real-time shadows, per-pixel lighting and the infamous fog render effect combined to create a pervasive sense of dread while staying within the PS2's 32-bit color depth. Even the particle effects, blood splatters, smoke, and the occasional monster burst, run smoothly at a steady 30 FPS, a non-trivial achievement on hardware that was already 5 years old. In short, Silent Hill 3 squeezed every ounce of the PS2's graphical muscle into a claustrophobic nightmare, proving that clever design can push a console far beyond its theoretical limits. It's a reminder that great games aren't just about raw power, they're about making that power feel terrifyingly alive. And that wraps up our list of 25 PS2 games that pushed the console to its absolute max. The PlayStation 2 wasn't just powerful for its time, it was fearless. Games like The Matrix, Path of Neo remain underrated, delivering ambitious set pieces and scale that few titles even attempted. Final Fantasy XII pushed RPG design forward with a massive world and a bold, ahead-of-its-time combat system, while Valkyrie Profile 2 showed just how deep and visually impressive real-time combat could be on the hardware. And of course, Mortal Kombat, Shaolin Monks proved that highly addictive, co-op-friendly gameplay could be just as memorable as technical feats. These games didn't just test the PS2, they defined what it was capable of. Thanks for watching, and let us know which PS2 title you think pushed the system the hardest.